It is no secret by now that the ancient Roman Empire and the figures who ran it have a complicated history revolving around lavish lifestyles, unquenchable power, and the cruel methods used to obtain it all. Rulers such as Caligula, Nero, and Tiberius are just a few names that often come to people's minds in this category. But there is one emperor whose violent and hedonistic past almost seems to trump them all. While his name is not always as commonly known, his legacy has gone down in history as one of the most widely debated to this day. Elagabalus was a young emperor whose personality is often described as eccentric, but whose actions are often described as disturbing. Welcome to the Roman Empire. Rise to power. Born in Syria in roughly 204 CE, Elagabalus was born as Sextus Varius Avitus Bassianus to Roman senator Sextus Varius Marcellus and Syrian noblewoman Julia Soaemius. Due to his mother's lineage, Elagabalus earned the hereditary title as the high priest to his namesake, the Syrian sun god Elgabal, or Baal. For this reason, he is also sometimes referred to as Heliogabalus. While both of his parents held great positions of power within the Roman government, it was primarily his mother and maternal grandmother, Julia Maesa, who helped Elagabalus earn the title Emperor. Elagabalus's grandmother was the aunt of Emperor Caracalla, who was assassinated by Elagabalus's predecessor, Emperor Macrinus. Macrinus was already becoming greatly disliked at the early start of his short reign, and because she also blamed Macrinus for the death of her sister, Elagabalus's grandmother saw the growing tension as a perfect opportunity for revenge. On May 16, 218, Elagabalus was smuggled into the 3rd Legion's camp by his mother and grandmother by means of bribing the soldiers. Once in, Elagabalus's mother declared him to actually be the illegitimate son of Caracalla, and therefore the rightful heir to the throne. Although this was completely false, his mother and grandmother hoped that the army's disdain for Macrinus would be enough to allow them to believe it as fact. Luckily for them, it was. The following month, on June 8th, Macrinus and his forces were defeated by the Roman forces outside the city of Antioch, with his death following shortly thereafter. Because of his mother's previous declaration, Elagabalus was now accepted as the new Roman emperor at the young age of 14, making him the youngest to ever rule at the time. Despite his new title, however, the majority of the true power was bestowed upon his mother and grandmother, who were both granted titles as Empress. Regardless of who was in charge, however, this new rule marked yet another tumultuous chapter in Roman history. Religious conflict. Almost as soon as his reign began, Elagabalus created conflict amongst the entire Roman Empire when he decided to bring along with him an artifact called the Black Stone. The stone was considered to be the most sacred object among those who followed the Syrian god Elgabal, and it had always resided in its temple at Emesa. Upon bringing it to Rome, Elagabalus declared that he would continue to carry out his duties as high priest while holding his new title as emperor, which was completely unheard of at the time. To show the public he was serious about the matter, he ordered a great temple to be built on the Palatine Hill to house the stone in its new home. The temple was named Elagabalium, or the Temple of Elagabalus. Elagabalus's grandmother knew immediately that this tension could pose an easy threat to their newly acquired power. So in 219, she arranged a marriage between him and Julia Cornelia Paula, a noble lady of a wealthy and respected Roman family. However, this remedy did not last long. In the following year of 220, Elagabalus began to make it clear that he not only planned on making Elgabal the primary god of the Roman state cult, but also acknowledged him to be the god of all gods. The outrage didn't end there, however. Elagabalus ultimately decided that a marriage between Elagabal and the Roman goddess of wisdom and justice, Minerva, would serve as a symbol of unity and power, and so he ordered the famous ancient statue of Minerva to be moved from the Temple of Vesta to the Elagabalium, where it was to be married to the black stone and solidify the symbolic union. However, Elagabalus's grandmother stepped in and convinced him not to go through with the marriage, which was a partial success. Instead, he married Elagabal to the moon goddess Urania, which was not considered as controversial compared to his original plans. Just when the people thought that his blasphemous actions had reached their peak, Elagabalus took things yet another step further. Just a year into his marriage, he divorced his wife and married a Vestal virgin, Julia Aquilia Severa. Vestal virgins were 6 priestesses of the virgin goddess Vesta, who ruled over the aspect of family. She is often referred to as goddess of the hearth, and so the primary task of the priestesses was to tend to the sacred, eternal fire in her temple. Considering the Romans believed that this flame was the heart of the empire itself, it should come as no surprise that the Vestal virgins were considered to be sacred and highly regarded figures in society. For this reason, a relationship with a Vestal virgin was an immediate death sentence for both her and her lover. However, Elagabalus wrote this off by claiming his relationship would also act as a symbol of marriage between Elagabal and Vesta herself, while also giving him the ability to bear godlike children. In hindsight, this was a fairly ironic idea, as the public viewed his behavior as much more childlike than godlike. Harmless fun or cruel entertainment. Much like the Greeks, the Romans often kept themselves entertained through athletic games and various forms of art. Comedic plays and gladiator sports were some of the most popular activities attended by the lower and upper classes alike, as many of these events were free to the public. While Elagabalus also had a love for these events, like everything else, he took his entertainment to an extreme level. It is said that at one of these infamous gladiator events, Elagabalus threw poisonous snakes throughout the audience and enjoyed watching the chaos unfold as people fought and ran over each other to avoid the fatal bites. On at least one occasion, he was known to chain several nude women to his chariot and whip them as they pulled it around his court like horses. Humiliation and trickery seemed to be Elagabalus's main source of humor, as one of his main sources of entertainment came from throwing large amounts of gold and silver into the streets and watching the people fight or even kill each other over the precious coins. However, the poor weren't his only targets. In an almost similar fashion, he would host various lotteries at his private events, in which some of the winning prizes were dead animals and other unpleasant items that ranged from simply insulting to potentially fatal. He would also subject his prestigious guests to various pranks, as he would consider them. Although I don't think even the average trickster would consider unleashing beasts such as lions onto your dinner party as a typical prank, or tying them to water wheels and watching them drown. Debated sexuality. Elagabalus' religious ideals and sense of humor weren't the only things that coined his personality as being eccentric. His very private life has also seemed to surpass his predecessors in reputation, which is partially why his past is so highly debated to this day. As it turns out, marrying a Vestal virgin wasn't his only outlandish act in this realm. Although he is recorded to be married 5 times total to various women, it seems that his lust for men was equally as strong, if not stronger. One of his known hobbies was to frequent local brothels and taverns as a solicitor rather than a patron. Furthermore, he was known to do this while dressing as a woman, including full face makeup. He is also alleged to have married a male slave named Hierocles, for whom he also dressed as a woman and allegedly even preferred to be referred to as Hierocles' mistress, wife, and queen. But Hierocles wasn't the only man that Elagabalus favored. An athlete named Zoticus was another one of his lovers, and while it is not confirmed, there is a possibility that they were also once married as well. According to Roman historian and senator Cassius Dio, there was a time when Zoticus called Elagabalus my lord, at which point Elagabalus corrected him by saying, "Don't call me lord, I am a lady." Because of these accounts and the allegation that Elagabalus once offered to pay a physician a large amount of money for gender reassignment surgery, it is widely debated to this day that Elagabalus just may be the first and possibly only transgender emperor in Roman history. However, the main problem with this theory lies in the source of Elagabalus's history. Most of the Roman people were displeased with Elagabalus from the start of his reign, and while it is easy to believe that Elagabalus may have been very open about his sexuality to an extent, it is believed by many experts that Roman historians exaggerated many of the accounts they wrote of Elagabalus. At the time, attacking a man's masculinity was a great insult, and homosexuality was not as widely tolerated by the early Romans in comparison to their Greek counterparts. Therefore, recording such allegations would have been an easy way to further tarnish Elagabalus's reputation for future generations. The beginning of the end. As I'm sure you can imagine, all of these factors easily lead to Elagabalus's downfall in the end, especially when you consider that he caused such chaos within the short span of 4 years. However, what you may not have imagined is that the person who got him into power is the same person who took that power away. In the summer of 221, Elagabalus's grandmother convinced him to name an heir to the throne in preparation for her master plan. Because he had no children himself, Elagabalus gave the title to his 13-year-old cousin Bassianus Alexanus, who would later be known as Alexander Severus. Ironically, however, it didn't take long for Elagabalus to see his cousin as a serious rival and threat, and he shortly began planning his cousin's execution. Tension grew in the family, as Elagabalus's mother, Julia Soamis, continued to stand beside him, while his aunt and grandmother plotted his demise. On March 11th, 222, Elagabalus attempted to order the execution of Alexanus. However, most likely due to yet another bribe on his grandmother's part, the Praetorian Guard refused to carry out the orders. Instead, while at the Praetorian Guard camp, Elagabalus and his mother were executed 2 days later on March 13th. To add insult to their legacy, they were beheaded, dragged through the streets of Rome, and dumped into the Tiber River. Conclusion. And that, my friends, ends the tale of the lesser-known yet highly infamous Roman Emperor, Elagabalus. Although his sexuality has been the most scrutinized aspect of his life, his personality as a whole truly is much to consider. It's hard to keep in mind that Elagabalus was only a teenager throughout his tumultuous reign, so it truly begs the question, was he really a cruel, sadistic ruler, or was he simply a young, dumb, teenage bully enjoying the privileges that came with his inherited wealth? In this case, it's probably safe to say that both of these ideas have a ring of truth to them. Regardless of which holds more truth over the other, the fact remains that Elagabalus will truly go down in history as one of the most eccentric emperors in Roman history. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week for another episode of the Roman Empire.